everyone, and welcome to NHBF Quick Bites. As a member, you have access to 24/7 legal helplines who are there to support you when you need it. As we know, many questions don't come up in a normal working hour, a normal working day, so they're there to help you, as I say, as and when you need. So today we have Matthew from Worknest, who are our legal employment law advisors, to help answer some of the everyday questions, the common questions that we're getting right now from our members, to help them stay safe, legal, and ideally profitable. And these questions, I say, are the common questions we're receiving, that the helplines are receiving on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to try and get some practical, real solutions, real situations in here as well, because I know the legal team, I say, are speaking to our members every day. So, Matthew, can I just ask you to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much, Tina, and it's great to be here. Yes, so I'm from Worknest, the NHBF advisory service. So I'm one of the senior employment law advisors. So I'm one of the guys on the phone, answering your queries, answering your emails, sending you various documentation, discussing your cases, and trying to understand your situation and really understanding your business and the circumstances that you're in at that particular point, and try and guide you through it in as simple, straightforward, but legally compliant way as possible. And hopefully today we'll be going through these key points and giving you some peace of mind on what to expect, and some common scenarios and real practical tips on how to get through these any particular issue that you have in a way that doesn't cause you too much stress.
Great. And I think also it's really important to think is that there's a number of ways that our members can access the helplines. It's not just a case of picking up the telephone. We have a membership team here that work from 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. And the members, ideally, what we're trying to do is encourage the members to call the team first here. So they can do a bit of a triage, because I know the employment law, the advisors, that they are the experts. And some of the questions that may come through, the team here can answer. If it's a simple holiday question, a simple sort of sickness question, whatever. And we tend to then triage them, put them on if they need the extra sort of support around processes and templates and that additional help and support and hand-holding that we know many of our members need. And I know there was something that came up the other day in a conversation I was having, is that, you know, they can cut a bob. They can do a lash treatment. We can't do that job. We're here to help them do the job that they can't do. Which I think is really important. As I say, the number of ways that they can access, they've got their ownership team. Obviously, there's the 24/7 helpline support as well, but they can do that by telephone, email, and there's WhatsApp as well, because we know how members are really busy. They could be on the shop floor, have a really quick question, quick WhatsApp, and the helpline team will support them through that. I think, just to be clear, that it is just that WhatsApp sort of text type support, but if anything moves on that needs that conversation, that will be had. Any templates and things will be had. I
think it's really good. I think this day and age, there's so many different ways to get the advice that you need and what suits you. Some people would rather speak to somebody on the phone. Some people would rather just have that followed up in an email. Some people would like just to have it answered in an email in the first place, or as you say, just to sending a quick message and getting a quick response back whilst you're in the middle of a busy day is equally fine. So there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It suits whatever suits your lifestyle, the way you run your business, and we'll find ways of working that out and providing our advice that suits you best.
And I know from the feedback that we get that our members do value the support. They really do. They do. I mean, the team is speaking to not just our business owners, but other businesses in different sectors and industries. But they really do get it. They do. They get small business and the support that they need. And we get that feedback through. And I think there was approximately sort of 10,000 interactions last year alone with just our members, with your team. I think there was something like 25% of our members used the helpline. 25% of our total membership used the helpline last year alone. So we know it's a really valuable benefit.
Yeah, and the point I'd make there, not just from your members, but from our wider client base, is that we find is that once clients start using us and they get into the habit of using us, it becomes like clockwork.
Yeah.
So we tend to find that we have loads, like a decent chunk of our clients use us a huge amount. and we get to know them really well. We on first name terms, and then some maybe only use us sporadically. Now some might choose to do that just by choice, because look, we're there as a safety net when you need us. Hopefully I never need to use you, but when I do, you're there. Whereas some people like to use it as for almost on a daily or weekly basis. I'm going to phone you up and have a chat with Matthew and see what kind of, am I on the right lines? So you can use it in very different ways if you want to. You don't feel that it is just there as a safety net. You can use us on a regular basis and get to know us really well if you want to. But if you just want us to be there as a safety net in the rare occasion that you do have an issue, that's fine as well. As long as that you do use us when you need us. Don't forget that we're there, because that's what we're there for.
That's the important bit, isn't it? As I say, there is that, not just there as a backup, you're there, as I say, when they need you, as I say, which isn't always during working hours, which is another important.
Yeah.
Employment Rights Act 2025, the big question, the big thing,
The big one that
2026.
Everyone's talking about.
So start us off. What are the headline changes coming through?
So I'll split this into two. There's the changes that came into effect in April this year, that we're all having to advise on and get to grips with now. And then there's the other changes that are coming down the road in 2027. So let's just start off with the ones that came into effect in April this year. So I'm not going to go into chapter and verse in this environment. If you want to get into more information about specifics and how it's going to affect you and your staff directly, then please go and speak to our advisors and get specific advice. But overall, statutory sick pay used to be only eligible after 4 days of sickness, and there used to be an earnings threshold. You needed over a certain level in order to be eligible for SSP. That's now changed. It's now a day one right. You get, if you're even off sick for just 1 day, you now get statutory sick pay. And there is now no threshold for payment. So many, many more people are now eligible for statutory sick pay. People who work very few hours or people who are on lower pay. So that's the first kind of primary one that we think we've been getting most of the calls on. The second one is that paternity leave is now a day one right as well. Used to have a 6-month service at a certain point in the pregnancy to be eligible, and that's now day one. There is no eligibility requirements for paternity leave, but the statutory paternity pay threshold is still there. So there is a slight difference there. And parental leave, the unpaid parental leave, used to have a 1 year threshold. That's now a day one right as well. So one of the key elements of the Employment Rights Act was they wanted to reduce anything that really was a barrier to people achieving it based on length of service. So you'll notice that number of things are day one rights. Similar, we noticed things like flexible working in the last few years. That's also become a day one right as well. So there's been a real direction of travel there to try and make things immediate rather than having to wait. So those are the ones that I think are the primary ones at this point. There's other things like sexual harassment has been added to whistleblowing as its own as a specific category in its own right. And there's now parental bereavement leave as well, which hopefully we never have to use. But if your partner has died within the first year of your baby's life, you get 52 weeks leave. So if you want more details on that, you can absolutely give us a call and discuss that. But so that's the ones that have the key ones that have come into effect in April this year. Next year, the big one is that the threshold for unfair dismissal has been reduced from 2 years to 6 months. So essentially, anyone who is employed from January this year, as soon as they hit January 2027, they will have unfair dismissal protection. So whilst the overall rights haven't changed, the time in which you suddenly become eligible for them has changed dramatically. So when people are employing people thinking, oh, well, I've got 2 years to decide whether this person is actually suitable for my business or not, you now only got 6 months. So you've now got to really focus your mind, and is this person right? And we could discuss that further down, how people deal with it.
And I think something in respect to that one, say being a big one, as you say, although it's not come into effect yet, you need to start planning now, because you're thinking potentially about taking on new staff members, however it may be. It'll be July this year.
Well, July this year, yeah.
From that point of July onwards.
So if you're starting to recruit now,
start thinking about,
well, what's my probationary period going to be? How am I going to monitor these people? What sort of schedules am I going to do in terms of training over that period? So when January does come, and I might need to make a decision, because you always recruit people thinking, well, we're going to have them forever. But when you run any business, it is a risk, it's an investment, it's got to be right. And now you just won't have that same leeway that you did before. And you used to almost be, in effect, an 18-month probation, a 24-month probationary period for people. Because it's realistically, the employer could always just say, well, provided it wasn't for a discriminatory reason, I can just say it's not working out. We won't have that same luxury now.
No, they'll at the time, as you say, because people tend to, certainly in our sort of the hair and beauty sectors, give you a 3-month probation, and we might just expend that for another 3 months. Well, actually, that 6 months is done then, so you've really got to think
You've really got to think about it.
3 months as to what you're.
So a lot of people did have a 6-month probationary period, depending on the sector. We would now absolutely advise that that's now 3 months, with the option to extend to 4 and 5 if you need to have you still within that 6-month period before you can decide to make a decision. Now, but there's some cases where somebody's been there 8, 9, 10 months, and you've decided, look, we're going to have to think about how we manage this employee, but you just won't be able to make a more commercial decision to end that person's employment anymore. You would have to go through the different stages of warnings and probation and performance management and all the rest of it, which can take time. So it's just something that's going to think, if you want to be able to make a commercial decision, as hard as that may be, you just have a much shorter time period to do it. So it really focuses the mind.
And I think, again, just bringing it back is that the members have access to the 24/7 helplines. They've got that help and support, that the team can help them through that process, whether it's performance management, whether it's terminating, exiting from the contract, etc. So that's so 3 practical steps. So we talked about, as well, sort of day-to-day practices, small businesses. Is there anything else that you need to add in respect to the Employment Rights Act, you think this?
So I think it's absolutely a case. Just educate yourself in the first instance. Not a lot of it is particularly complicated. It is either just removing thresholds, lowering thresholds. And if you do just want clarity on it, read up on it first. We have guides on the websites. Because it's been such a high profile thing, there's been heaps of articles on it online if you want to just read some really good guides as well. ACAS have done guides. I know People Management have done guides on it as well. And just explaining what you need to do. And it is actually really, often these things kind of get a bit lost because it's a little bit niche. But in this case, it has been so high profile. There's lots written about it. If you want to speak to our advisors, absolutely do so if you have a specific case. So first of all, educate yourself. There's plenty out there, and it is important that we get it right. Second point is to update your policies. Again, there's plenty on there. We can help you with that. And we'll just need to, it's about changing a few words here and there. It's not necessarily about full-scale changes. Like, for example, like the parental bereavement leave is a brand new policy. So that will need to be added in, but everything else is just removing things like full waiting days for SSP
and the thresholds,
and thresholds and things like that. So it's not not massive changes, but they're all small ones. And make your employees aware. Doesn't need to be, you don't need to reissue everything to everyone. Maybe just an email just to say, look, just make you aware that statutory sick pay has now changed. Or things like if you may not be aware that you're now eligible for paternity leave from day one, just things like that, just so that there's no suggestion that you're not keeping your
clear lines of communication.
Clear lines of communication.
So they know what to expect.
So know what to expect. And so by the time, 6, 8, 10 months down the line, it almost becomes not normal. We forget that you had to wait 4 days to get paid SSP. It just becomes a natural.
And most of that's picked up by payroll anyway. At the end of the day, as payroll providers will.
Yeah, well, that's certainly my
press the button.
Well, that's certainly my response. That's a payroll question, not an employment law question.
That's right. Oh, I think that's everything on employment rights acts for 2025. Or in respect of 2020.
I would say so. I would say so for now. I would say there is quite a bit. So go in and read it and speak to our advisors and yourselves if you have any further questions. But broadly, I think that's it.
Yeah, and don't panic.
We've got
your back.
Don't panic. Don't panic.
So moving on, managing difficult employees and handling difficult conversations. So in your experience, what's the most common mistakes that business owners, employers make when dealing with these conflict situations?
The key one is they don't address situations early enough, meaning they allow things to escalate, fester, meaning that you have to take things more seriously later on. Other colleagues feel as if one employee is getting away with murder. And they begin to resent it, and the whole culture breaks down. And when then you try and address it, you're addressing it too late, and it then becomes very difficult to manage that point. So yeah, the biggest issue is that we don't deal with things early enough, and promptly enough in order to solve it and nip it in the bud.
Yeah, and I guess you picked up on it. Obviously, for majority of our members, they're going to be really small, sort of small businesses with 4 or 5 members of a team.
Yeah,
and as you said, that could really be picked up quite quickly.
Yeah,
discussions, over the wash basin and the various areas of the room. So why do you think these mistakes happen so frequently?
Yeah. Well,
in small businesses.
Yeah. Well, for the precise reason that you've said, they are small, and there's the barriers between employer and employee often tend to be get much more blurred in that scenario. You tend to get very friendly with your employer and your manager, and you sometimes forget that that's exactly what they are, and that it's a manager-employee relationship. And then the manager thinks, oh well, I certainly don't want to ruin that relationship, so I'm sure it'll be fine, and they don't mention it, and then things get worse, and then it just becomes much more difficult to manage it. Whereas in a larger organization, those barriers and those kind of the hierarchy is much stronger, so people do feel more have a license to say, I'm going to be firm and I'm going to bring this up, because sometimes that friendship's just not quite there so much.
Sure.
Whereas in a small family business, there might be friends of friends, there might have been your friend's son or your friend's daughter that you employed, and you don't want to mention it. So I can understand why people don't raise things early enough. So it's not a case of beating people over the head and saying, why do you deal with this earlier? I can understand it. It's just that if you want to deal with things properly, it doesn't help the situation at all.
Doesn't help. So practical techniques, what techniques can employees use to approach these conversations? How can the salon owner prepare themselves for that conversation? Who do they call? who you're going to call, and what does a well-structured and fair sort of process look like in short terms? Obviously, as I say, the support's there from the helpline, but just really quick sort of short terms.
Yeah. So if you're phoning us and saying, look, I don't think this is going to be an issue yet, but I just wanted to put it on your radar and just kind of make you aware of it, that's great for us, because it's meaning that you're on it early. We can discuss it. You can discuss it with us. We can give you a few pointers, and we can say, well, actually, no, I think this is actually a fairly easy thing for you to solve, and maybe ask this question and do that. So the first thing I would say is call us, call yourselves, get to talk it through. We can kind of give you pointers on it. But if you think, I don't think I'm maybe making a mountain out of a molehill here, that's actually a good thing, because it means you're dealing with it early before it's got too much. And it also allows you to go into a meeting with your employee and keep it quite light, because nobody likes to go in and feel as if they're being accused of anything. So if you can keep it light and say, look, I've just noticed this, can we solve it? Or, I've noticed that maybe your sickness absence has gone up a little bit. Is there anything I can help you with? Rather than going, you've been off for 40 days in the last 12 months. This is appalling. You can, if you nip it in the bud early, that helps, keeps it light, and smaller issues are easier to manage. And another point I would make is don't leave things to appraisals or scheduled one-to-ones to deal with them.
No.
If you're leaving it to an appraisal to deal with it, you're probably dealing with it too late, because it was several months ago this happened, and the employee will naturally say, well, why didn't you speak to me about this several months ago? And often by that point it's escalated. So don't think, oh, well, that's an appraisal issue. Deal with it now, deal with it informally. So by the time the appraisal comes, or the scheduled one-to-one comes, you can say, spoke to you about this last week, or it's last month, or 6 weeks ago, and pleased to say we've resolved it. I can put a tick in that box, so the employee can leave the room feeling as if they've actually, it's a positive thing rather than a negative thing. So that's what I'd say. Phone us first. We can give you pointers, deal with it early, and don't wait for appraisals, because that's when people feel they're just getting battered over the head for the last 6 months worth of issues, when actually if you dealt with it early, those things that doesn't arise.
Shouldn't happen. Great stuff. So preventing escalation.
Yeah.
How do they spot the early warning signs? I suppose some of these things also come up into the sickness absence, which comes through to the employment rights sort of changes really as well. There's lots of different scenarios. But how do you spot the warning signs that there's issues developing? What does documentation? What role does document have in that? Obviously, we've talked about policies and procedures and things as well. So can you give us a little bit more about that one?
Yeah. So in terms of spotting the early warning signs, I remember when I was a student and I was kind of studying this in the first instance, my lecturer at the time said, everything that you deal with in HR and employment law is a symptom of something else. Rarely is high sickness absence just because your staff happen to be sicker than everyone else. It's either a symptom internally, or there's something externally that's causing it, because it always tends to be that issue that the same people are always sick and some people are never, but it's often a symptom of something else. So if you can go away and try and find out what those symptoms are, that's something you can address, rather than just pulling out a policy and saying, well, this person's met a trigger point, I'm going to give them a warning. If you start seeing that somebody's absence has ticked up, or their attitude maybe has changed slightly, or that they used to be quite good friends with the rest of their staff and now there seems to be a little bit of aggro there, don't just say, well, I'm going to start disciplining people left, right and centre, or giving people warnings left, right and centre. We might need to do that subsequently, but if you start looking at it as a symptom of something else, saying, right, I'm going to find out what that symptom is and be a bit of a detective and try and find that out, that's when I think you're likely to get to the root of the problem, rather than just pulling out a policy and procedure thinking I've done my job now. So I think that's the way I would look at it, is to look at everything as a symptom. Don't look at it just at face value and think, well, as long as I'm handing out warnings, I'm managing it properly. Ask questions. Ask questions from a supportive perspective and saying, we're here to help you. You know, we do have a duty of care towards you, and come to us, because it might be the fact that people are feeling a little bit insecure about their skills that they have, and they might be feeling a bit of a fish out of water with different employees. There might be things going on at home. So most things can be addressed if we start seeing things as symptoms rather than necessarily things that need to be given warnings, and policies and procedures are there to support the process rather than an end in its own right.
Sure, perfect. So we talked about the early warning signs. So building a healthier culture. You know, what systems or habits I mean, you've probably covered quite a few of those already, is say a bit of investigation, what the habits that employers can put in place to reduce the likelihood of these.
Yeah, so I think the first one, and we touched on it earlier, is to make sure, certainly in small businesses, that and there is a clear structure and what's the right phrase? Barrier or reporting line between lines of communication between the business owner, the managers, and everyone else. Because I think once everybody just becomes part of one big group, and we forget that, then who's the boss in a way, and that's when things become. That's when you start speaking to your business owner in a way that you really shouldn't be speaking to them. You start expecting things just to be done because they're your friend, and you start taking liberties, or you just think, oh well, I'll just text. Rather than phoning in, for example, on the day you might be absent, you end up just sending a text 2 minutes before you're meant to come in, because you think, oh, they're my friend, they'll understand. But actually, that's when it spreads, and we've got appointments to make, and that's when things start to break down a little bit. So that's the first thing. Make sure that, I don't want it to be kind of too dictatorial, but at the same time, we've got to remember that this is a business. There is a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy for a reason. And if you are going to be able to enforce these policies and do them with credibility, people have to know who the boss is and who's making the decisions and why. So that's the first thing. Second thing I would say is ensure that people know the job, enjoy the job, everything becomes routine eventually. Even the person who's, flying the fighter jets eventually probably thinks it becomes a day job. But if you can encourage people to think that this isn't just a 9 to 5, this is a career, this is a business that we want to really drive forward, then I think that prevents people getting a little disillusioned. So get people to buy into something that you're trying to achieve, and that there's something more than just coming in to 9 to 5, seeing your clients and going home again. There's something wider to that. That breeds a loyalty to the business, the loyalty to you as a business owner, and to your colleagues when you're all driving in the same direction. So I think, and the way that we do that is to making it very clear from year to year, quarter to quarter, what our goals are, and what we'd like to achieve. So that's another point. And also in terms of culture, it's consistency, making sure that everybody feels as if they are not being treated differently for one reason or another. Now, there's often examples where people feel they're being treated one way or another, differently to somebody else. You're always going to get that. But provided that you're looking at your documentation and you've got that, you're understanding what did we do last time in the same situation, and you can look back at that, and you can say, well, if I am going to treat somebody differently in this occasion for whatever reason, I can justify it. Because that's when I think disharmony comes in, is when people see that, oh, well, that person got this and I didn't get that, and hang on, they're getting away with murder and I didn't. That happens a lot. So if we can explain to people certain decisions that were made and why, how it fits into the wider structure and goals that we're looking to achieve, and if they've been bought into that culture and that drive to succeed earlier on in the process, you're much more likely to have a scenario where everyone's driving in the same direction and there's a good culture, and if the door's always open, to have those conversations and discuss it, then all the better.
Can you walk us through what's a fair, legal, compliant disciplinary process, and what should it look like for a business? So with this is a really common question.
Yeah.
We're getting on from the membership team, the legal team, I'm sure. So can you just briefly talk us through that?
So broadly, a fair disciplinary process has at least 2 stages, maybe 3. So the first stage is an investigation. The second is a disciplinary hearing. And the third one is an appeal, if the employee chooses to use that appeal. So often when we're dealing with employees, and we're dealing with businesses who phone us about a disciplinary procedure, we're always saying to them, look, please phone us as early as possible, so we can get the investigation right. Because if the investigation isn't right, we're going into the disciplinary hearing too soon, and then we're kind of setting ourselves up for a fail. So, and this is particularly true with what we were discussing earlier with the change to the threshold for unfair dismissal, moving from 2 years to 6 months. Many more people will be captured by this process, that if we get it wrong, they'll maybe be able to attempt a claim at the employment tribunal. So if you've ever kind of relied on the fact that, oh, well, I can just go in and pull somebody in after 18 months and say it's not working, particularly if it's a conduct related issue, you won't be able to do that now. So this has become, it's always been important, but it's become doubly important now, given the fact that so many more people will be covered by this, from a disciplinary perspective.
Sure. So what are the most common errors that employers make? Well, there's mistakes as such that during the process that they tend to get wrong, as I say, in respect of support or however, and we can follow that one up, as you said, you briefly touched on it, and what potentially could happen by not following the process.
So the first thing is, I think employers try and rush the process. Disciplinary processes are serious things. They can't be rushed. They've got to be dealt with soberly. You can't just do it on a Monday and have an outcome on a Wednesday. You've got to take your time with it. Think about who your witnesses are going to be. Think about what sort of data that you might need. Is there CCTV footage? Is there clocking out records? Who was present? Who were the witnesses? How am I going to speak to them? Am I going to get them in for an investigation meeting themselves? Or am I going to ask them to write a statement? All of those things. So get your plan considered early on. Don't try and rush it, and phone us. So it's the important point, because we'll be able to say, well, have you thought about this? What have you done in the past? That's another important point. If this was dealt with informally in the past, think about why that was. Could we deal with it informally in the first instance before having to go through a lengthy disciplinary procedure? What are your policies? What are your procedures? What procedure and policy has this person allegedly breached? When we bring them in for an investigation meeting, can we point to something? Were they aware of it? Have they been trained? So there's lots of things people can maybe dive in head first and say, right, I'm going to discipline this person, or tell them that they're going to get a warning. That's a classic. There should be no decisions made in advance. Nothing should be predetermined at that point. Also think about who is going to do the investigating, who is going to be the disciplinary manager, and who is going to be the appeal. The ACAS code clearly states that ideally that a different person should be holding each stage to give that independence at each point. So whoever's chairing it can look at it independently at that point. A lot of your members are small businesses. They might not have a huge sweep of managers to be able to do it. So there might be examples where you think, well, I simply don't have the scope in order to do that. But think about it in the first place. maybe you think, actually, no, I can do the investigation, I can do the appeal, but I do have somebody else. I can do the hearing, but maybe somebody else can do the appeal. So think of those things. Yeah. So the key mistake is that people rush it. They think, oh, well, all I need to do is interview just one person and go straight to hearing, give them 2 hours notice and tell them they're going to get a warning and do it. No, do it. It's a serious thing. Give it the respect it deserves and really plan it so that when you go and do arrive at the process, that you've got your eyes wide open.
I think, as like you said as well, you refer to it as the legal helpline. You said earlier on, the helpline advisors are not just there for that one-off phone call. It's not, oh, I can only ring them today and I can't ring them again tomorrow. They are there to offer that support all the way through that process. They can take you step by step by step, provide template to, listen to your concerns and whatever else, because, and you touched on it, it can be quite an expensive mistake to make if you don't do the process properly.
It can.
So have you got any sort of examples? Or
So
anything you can...
So I think a key point here is that if you are taken to an employment tribunal, even if you've got the strongest case in the world, right, and you may well have, there's time and cost of running a tribunal.
Yeah.
First of all, your own stress of having to be kind of knowing that you've got that hanging over you. There is the preparation time. There is, and if you want to engage a solicitor to represent you, they have their costs. So before you even get to the tribunal itself, there's the time and effort of going through that, and really you just want to be focusing on running your business. So if an employee is determined to take you into an employment tribunal, that's up to them. And they will, and we can't force them to not make that decision. We can maybe try and settle with them later on. But what I would say is, don't hand the employee an open goal by failing to follow the process correctly during the initial investigation and disciplinary hearing and appeal, because even if you're absolutely spot on with the decision that you've made, if you've fallen down procedurally, you could really scupper your chances at that point. Particularly, and there's absolutely no need to fall down procedurally, because you've got us on the phones, you can speak to us, we can provide you with guides, we can talk you through the process. So don't feel as if you need to wing it. You really don't. There's so much support out there. And going back to rushing it again, if an employee goes off sick during the process, which they often do to try and avoid it, don't panic. Phone us up and we'll talk you through the process. There's things you can do. Don't just say, oh, well, I'm going to make a decision in their absence, and without giving the opportunity to attend. There's things that we can do. Or don't think, oh, well, I'm going to just do a half job in the investigation because I'm really busy and I need to get things done. I'm not going to have this person ruin my week or my month because I'm going to deal with it. No, take your time, be patient, because I guarantee you in 18 months' time, when you're faced with an employment tribunal claim, the few weeks that you could have spent getting it right will suddenly feel as if it would have been a flash. And so, be patient with it, I would say.
I think it's also worth noting that is not to think that the employee, that member of your team, isn't also getting support there end. Because some people also think that, oh, they don't know what they're doing. But obviously ACAS is there to support the employee. So if you take a wrong step, somebody else is going to pick up on that.
I think we need to mention ChatGPT and AI.
Glad you brought up AI. I was going to do that.
Because things that employees necessarily may not have known about before, they're being notified of it and they're becoming aware of it through AI. Some of it is complete nonsense, but some of it is real, and things that were probably previously pretty niche are now becoming pretty common. And we can have some thinking, okay, where's that come from?
Is that the question?
And also sometimes we used to be able to spot who was getting legal advice from the letters that they wrote and the emails that they received. But now everybody's letters are absolutely magnificent because they're AI generated and they're all the same. So that's an important point to make, because your people aren't as, you can't just assume, as you say, that they don't know what they're talking about, because they might, and also you could be wrong, which is why always do a proper investigation, because the amount of times I've spoken to a client on the phone and I've thought, well, this sounds absolutely slam dunk here. Absolutely go down to a disciplinary route with that. And then we've done an investigation and there was an absolutely clear, rational explanation for it.
Yeah.
And you don't. That goes back to not making any predetermined decisions and on outcomes, because you never know. So assume you don't know everything. Go in with an open mind, and you'll never know what you might find. You might find that actually you're wrong, your processes are deficient, and you need to change something internally, and you'll think, well, actually, I'm glad I looked at it properly.
And I think it's something we discuss in maybe another session as well, is remaining consistent, I think, as well, to ensure that you've got that fair treatment across the board. If you're coming across the disciplinary, is, again, making sure your processes are fair for everybody, as I say, not sort of singling out one individual.
Look back what you've done before. I mean, we'll often say this to your members when they phone us. Has something like this happened before? And if so, what did you do then? Because if you ever do end up in the employment tribunal, they will always look at, were you consistent? And a reasonable employer will always be consistent and not treat anyone differently based on the same circumstances. So they'll look at those things. Did you follow your own processes, and did you follow your processes consistently in different environments, in different scenarios? And if you do treat people differently, if you keep good records and you keep good notes, you'll be able to justify why. And that allows you to remain consistent, because you can actually look back on your records and say, what did I do there and why?
Lovely. So just if one piece of advice you could give a business owner who's wanting to avoid disciplinary problems altogether, what would that be?
One thing, I would say, clear lines of communication, and so that if there is ever any issues, we can deal with them early and nip things in the bud. It would be like clear lines of communication and bringing things early.
Intervention, perfect. And ring the legal helpline. Remember to add that access. To be able to breathe here, but access to the legal helplines. And I think it's also important to note here is that all of our members, there's obviously certain terms and conditions, do have access to a £50,000 of legal expenses insurance. So providing they've followed the processes, they've taken the advice, done exactly what they should be doing, getting to the step of a tribunal, or even settlement, as you said before, as well mentioned, then there is an insurance policy that they get part of their membership. So Matthew, a few quick fire questions for you. So we're hearing a lot from members at the moment that they're struggling financially. What options do they have when it comes to their teams?
So first thing we can look at is we can look at reducing hours. You can think about people maybe working more flexibly. We can ultimately look at redundancy if we need to look at redundancy. But as long as you're consulting and you keeping people along from the ride and explaining why we need to do things in a certain way, and look at options short of redundancy, before redundancy, and you consult and you speak to us about what options might be able to, we'll be able to find the things that that suit your business best.
Great stuff. Our policy, or members' policies, are to have their employees ring in sick, but some are texting or they're not ringing at all. How can they manage that? What should members do? So
just make sure from the get-go that employees know that the expectation to phone in is not "I like to have," it's mandatory, and it's a slippery slope. If you allow it once, they'll do it again, and people think, "Oh, well, so and so got away with it." And particularly now, when sickness and statutory sick pay is made from day one, one of the risks we're concerned about is that the 1 day sickie will become more and more common. So by holding employees to account, by asking them to phone in and ask them questions, not too intrusively, of course, and get them to account for their absence, that might be one way of combating it.
So getting on top of that one, pretty sharpish, as we've
Absolutely.
discussed in other sessions as well. So
Yeah.
super. We're seeing more requests. You've mentioned it for flexible working. That's an option. So what do employers need to know about flexible working?
Yeah, so the expectation now is that flexible working is the default rather than the exception. The key thing for your members is that flexible working in your environment is actually much harder to accommodate than, say, someone in an office job. Someone in an office job can work from home, which is the common one now, or they might be able to change the way that their shift patterns work and all the rest of it. For you guys, which is very much customer focused in the salon, in the store, whatever you're doing, other than maybe changing hours here and there, the options for flexible working is a little bit limited. But just make sure that you're following the right process. You aren't just saying yes. Certainly, if you're saying no, you're not just doing it off the bat. You think about it. You follow a process, and you can justify, if you're not able to uphold somebody's flexible working request, you can justify it based on the statutory reasons. I mean, if you're ever unsure, call the helpline. We'll talk you through it, and give you that advice, because the expectation these days is that you approve it. So if you're ever not going to approve it, then really think about it and seek advice.
Lovely, thank you. I know it's a quick bite, it should be a really quick question, but it's a really high level. There's still confusion around self-employment and employed.
Yeah.
So what's the risk?
So the risk is that somebody who you think is self-employed, because that's what's on the paperwork, are day-to-day being treated and behaving exactly like an employee would. So they might have been self-employed for years and years and years, and suddenly there's a dispute, and somebody mentions to them, "Oh, hang on a minute, how are you working day-to-day? You might have a claim here," and then they actually think, "Oh, right, I'm going to argue that I'm an employee." And then they put in a claim for unfair dismissal or redundancy pay or something that they otherwise should have, you don't think they'd have got. And they end up potentially being eligible for lots of compensation as a result. So don't just rely on what the agreement says. Think about how they're being dealt with on a day-to-day basis. Make sure you treat them differently. If you're unsure about how a self-employed person should be managed, phone us, email us, talk it through. Often in these scenarios, it's rarely clear cut. There'll be some things that might indicate self-employment, and there's some things that might indicate employed status, and it's a spectrum, and we'll be able to advise you where on that spectrum it falls. And we might say, well, if you've been doing this historically, maybe stop doing that. Certainly around things like booking holidays and wearing uniforms and providing the equipment and stuff. That tends to be the thing that tends to trip people up. And so just be conscious of that. And particularly now, again, with the qualifying service being reduced from 12 for unfair dismissal being 2 years to 6 months, more people will be captured by this. So it's just something to be aware of. Speak to your advisors if you're unsure, and we'll be able to give you a steer on it.
Super. And again, for anything and everything that we've covered in any of our sessions, the helplines, The 24/7 helplines, it's not just employment law, and we know where there's a commercial team that I know is operated by a separate team, but health and safety helpline and the tax and VAT. So we can help our members with a full range of inquiries that they might have. So our members are encouraged in probably almost every circumstance that we've talked about in all of our sessions.
And I would absolutely say we have heard everything. So there is nothing that there's no question that's too small. There's no scenario we probably haven't dealt with before. And if there is a scenario that we haven't dealt with before, well, then that's great because it's our bread and butter and it gives us something different to look into. So yeah, don't be shy. Just give us a call and we'll be able to help you.
Great. Lovely. Thanks so much, Matthew.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.